Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha said, I teach one thing and one thing only, and that is that there is suffering and how to come to the end of suffering. And one of our really big obstacles to coming to the end of suffering are the hindrances. And I know we talked about these often here, so if you want to just call out what are the 5 hindrances?
Sense desire.
Sense desire, aversion, sloth and torpor, also known as dullness and drowsiness.
Restlessness and worry.
Yeah, restlessness and worry or remorse.
Doubt.
And doubt. Yes. So desire is wanting something that we don't have, so wanting to pull it in. And aversion is sort of the opposite side of the coin. Is you have something that's in your face and you don't want it and you're trying to push it away. So tonight I'm going to focus on the hindrance of desire. And the spoken chant that we did tonight was to show you where this fits into the teachings of the Buddha. So as he said, I teach you the way to the end of suffering. So that's the 4th noble truth, the path or the way to the end of suffering, which is known as the Noble Eightfold Path. And I'm just going to share that again for just a moment here. And so step 6 in the Noble Eightfold Path is right effort. And so this is where we hear about what to do about these hindrances when they pop up in our meditation practice. And it's the 2nd effort here for the abandoning of unwholesome states of mind. So that's referring to the hindrances that have arisen. One generates desire, makes effort, arouses energy, exerts one's mind, and strives. So even better if we can do the first effort, which is preventing them from arising. But anybody who sat down to meditate knows that these things sneak in there frequently. But anyway, that's where it fits in the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, I want to assure you that there is a difference between desire and preferences. We can have a preference for something, and it's not going to cause us suffering as long as we're not saying, I can't be happy unless I have this preference. When we're saying, I can't be happy unless I have this desire, then that's when we're into the desire section. So for example, today I was in the Canada Day parade with my fiddling group, and I had a preference for being able to hear the person next to me playing, so I'd know whether I was, keeping pace with the rest of the group. But we had like a drum band a few squadrons ahead of us, and then we had a fire truck behind us who was enjoying leaning on his horn, blaring it. So sometimes I hadn't a clue. I couldn't hear anybody around me. So I had no idea whether I was playing in sync or not playing in sync. So I had a preference for, being able to hear my fiddle mates. But if I had moved that preference towards the desire, saying like, I'm going to be miserable if I don't get my preference, then I would have been creating suffering for myself. And it's the same, so there's nothing wrong with trying to create the conditions, I think, that allow you to have your preference. Like, for example, here we try and offer people a quiet place to come and meditate. But we've had occasions where neighbors have decided it's time to use their chainsaw and cut down a tree and cut it into sections while we're doing meditation. Last Friday, there was one of those trucks that had a backup beep, and it was like beeping the entire meditation session. So we have to, realize that we can try our best to create the conditions to suit our preference, but we're definitely not in total control. So if we can keep it as a preference and not escalate it into a desire, like I can't be happy unless this condition is here. So if we can keep it at the preference, then we can prevent suffering for ourselves. So that's an important distinction. So desire it refers to the sensory realm and two other things. So it's desire for, beautiful sights, beautiful sounds, tasty food, nice aromas, comforting touch, pleasant thoughts. And it also applies to two other areas, the desire for existence and the desire for annihilation. So the desire for existence, I'll probably show up mostly um, at the end of our life. And, if we're dying and there's no medical treatment or whatever to prevent us from dying at that moment. And if we're like desiring to stay alive, we're going to be creating a lot of suffering for us in our last moments of life. Um, and then the desire for annihilation, the extreme part of that, or the extreme example of that, is suicide, where you're so unhappy with life that you have this desire to sort of end your life. It's a mistaken desire because in Buddhism we believe in rebirth, so you're just delaying the experiences you're having into the next lifetime instead of dealing with them. But the desire for annihilation is much more common with like so many of us. Um, and if for people who use drugs and alcohol just sort of to go blotto, so that's a way to sort of not be not be in touch with maybe painful reality, or like all these little video games or social media things that are very addictive, like they can um take our attention away from life. So those are sort of the areas that desire comes. And of course, there is this belief going along with the desire that if I get what I want, I'll have this lasting happiness. And certainly, with a lot of things, we're going to get some happiness with satisfying our desires, but it's impermanent. And so that's the problem with it. It's impermanent. Okay, so now I'm going to spend the rest of the time sort of talking about sort of how to let go, or what are some antidotes to the hindrance of desire when it arises. But there's two baseline attitudes or beliefs that it's very important to have um, underneath of all of these various antidotes or ways to let go of desire. And the first one is the attitude of kindness or compassion when a hindrance arises. Because if we have aversion to a hindrance arising, well, then we've just added a second, now we've got two hindrances going. We've got the hindrance of desire, and then we also have the hindrance of aversion. So we've just like doubled our hindrances. So it's really important to have this background feeling of kindness or compassion. So you can think about it, we're training our minds. We're trying to train our minds not to be grabbing onto desires, and think about it like you're training a young child, various life skills, or you have a puppy and you're trying to train the puppy how to heal or something. So just you want to have all the kindness that you would bring to training a child or training a puppy. You want to bring that to training your own mind. So this is really vitally important as a baseline attitude to our working with the hindrances. And then the next is this belief, and this has to do with the Buddhist concept of anatta, like not self, that there's nothing solid about us. We're like a flowing river, or we're like a verb, not a noun. And however, whatever we're doing or thinking or feeling or whatever at any moment is due to past causes and conditions, or present causes and conditions. And these causes and conditions are changing all the time. So we're in flux, we're changing all the time. So when a hindrance arises, we don't want to be saying something like, oh, I want this thing. Instead, we could say something like, oh, desire has arisen, and it must have arisen because of certain causes and conditions. So instead of owning it, just see it as this, part of the process of this life with causes and conditions. Oh, this has arisen. So the sutta I know that sort of best describes how to deal with this is the middle length sayings of the Buddha, Majjhima Nikaya number 20, 5 ways of letting go of thoughts. And the first way, so when you're sitting meditating or just going through daily life and some kind of a desire arises, then the Buddha said the first method that we can use is just to change our attention to something that's wholesome. So if we're meditating at the time, then the easiest thing is just go back to our meditation object. So if breath is your meditation object, and then you get a desire for something, maybe the person next to you to stop coughing or the chainsaw next door to stop buzzing, then just reorient your attention to your breath. Now, it might be very helpful if the hindrance is a little bit strong. Like it may be hard, like to bring your mind back, because the hindrance can just whack you back again. And so it might be very helpful to make your meditation object like a little bit coarser. So if it's the breath you're working with, then you could make it a little bit like less subtle, like more coarse, by starting to count. So for a period of time, you could just, on each out breath, go 1, 2, 3, like just, count to 5 or 10 and then restart again, just to make it a little bit stronger to hold your attention with your breath. Or to use the mantra, use some kind of a word or a phrase when you're breathing in or when you're breathing out. Like think of the word peace as you breathe in, and think of the word release as you breathe out, or whatever words are helpful to you. Switching from sitting meditation to walking meditation is another way to sort of make it a little bit less subtle and maybe stronger for helping you to stay with the meditation object. And then another one that I've demonstrated here before, and I'll try and do it here so that people, you can see it here. So if you pretend that my arms are resting on my thighs, when you breathe in, you turn one hand up. When you breathe out, you raise it. When you breathe in, you bring it towards you. And when you breathe out, you touch yourself. So breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And then breathe in, breathe out, and then touching on the breathe in, and then turning your hand over on the breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe in, breathe out. And so that's also something, a way to make it a little bit sort of stronger, your meditation practice to help you to stay focused on your meditation object. And if the desire is arising during daily life, then whatever you happen to be doing at the time, then you can just refocus back on that task. So that's the first method that the Buddha gives for us to let go of desirous thoughts. And he suggests in these 5 different ways that we always start with number 1. And then if that's not strong enough, we do that and it's not helpful, then we move on to number 2. And then number 3, 4, and 5. So the second one is seeing the danger in that desire. And his teaching that's just one before, like this is Majjhima Nikaya number 20. So in Majjhima Nikaya number 19, 2 kinds of thoughts, that entire sutta is really talking about seeing the danger in desires. So a big danger is morality. Like if, hopefully you wouldn't want something so badly that you would end up stealing it, like breaking a moral code by stealing something that you couldn't afford to buy. And then another possible moral transgression could be sexual feelings. If sexual feelings arise, but they're towards somebody who's not your partner. And if you're in a committed relationship and the other person's in a committed relationship, then you don't want to transgress by following through on that urge. And it's really important, like for these sexual feelings, like we're here with human bodies and we're sort of wired for these kinds of feelings to arise. So again, you don't want to take it personally. If this should happen, you just, again, don't own it. Just say, oh, this has arisen. I mean, of course, if it's an inappropriate situation, as I said, because you're in a committed relationship or the other person is, then you don't want to act on it. But you also don't want to be upset with yourself. Remember our baseline thing of kindness or compassion. This is just how human beings are wired. So I had a very interesting experience decades ago when I was doing my training in body-centered psychotherapy. And our teacher was working with one of my classmates, and he was working on some emotional issue. And he just came to some very tender moment. And the teacher very beautifully at some proper time just sort of grabbed this student in a big bear hug. And the moment he did that, I remember just having this temporary washover of a sexual feeling. I thought, whoa, that was kind of interesting. But when I thought about it afterwards, I thought, what was the teacher demonstrating? He was demonstrating like being a very good parent, right? He was very attuned to the student that he was working with, and he gave that student something that student sort of needed just at the right moment. And so, am I wired in such, are we wired in such a ways that, hey, that would be a good mate because he'd make a very good parent. That's the only way I could figure it out, because I've been studying with this teacher for some time and had never had, a feeling like that. But it was just when he had shown this really attuned, sort of like parenting kind of thing to this student that this feeling just sort of came up. So I thought that was very interesting. So an area where this is important for all of us to be sensitive to is when we come to a meditation group or to a meditation retreat with monastics, people who become monastics, they've chosen a celibate life. They've chosen not to be in an intimate relationship. They've chosen that following the spiritual pathway is their major focus in life. But they're still hardwired like all the rest of us. And so you don't want to be coming in, sort of immodest clothing, because until they reach the third level of awakening, that at the third level of awakening, that wiring is somehow cut and there's no more desire, no more aversion. But it's not cut until the third level of awakening, and that's a fairly high attainment. So we really want to be sensitive, to the monastics that we're in contact with. Now, there's other things besides morality that are a danger. If we're really wishing something that's quite expensive, like are we going to put ourselves into debt or, run out of grocery money before the end of the month or whatever? So there's, there can be the danger of, financial stress, going for a certain desired item. There just could be the danger of, how many things have you bought, and within a short time, they're in the closet gathering dust and you've forgotten about them, so you've put this, put out some effort or money or whatever to get something, and then in a short time it's lost its appeal or it's lost its interest for you. Or whatever, if it's an object that you're wanting to acquire, is it something that's fragile and could break? Or is it something that's going to be time consuming to maintain? Like some things take a lot of maintenance. And are you going to get frustrated at maybe you're a busy person and now this new object that you've gotten, if it takes a lot of maintenance, then you may be resenting that. So these are all looking at what are the possible dangers if I indulged in this, tried to acquire this desired situation or object. And one of the analogies for this is holding a hot coal. If you pick up a hot coal, you don't have to be saying to yourself, oh dear, this hot coal is going to burn my hand. I better let it go. We're not going to do that. If we have a hot coal, it's going to be like instantly. And so it's the same thing. If we can really bring to mind the dangers that go with this desire, then it's going to be like the hot coal. We're just going to drop that desire. We don't have to fight with it or push with it. We're just going to drop it if we really clearly see the danger. Okay, so that's the second method. The first method, just refocus your mind to something wholesome, possibly just back to your meditation object. The second is seeing the danger. And then the third way to let go of these desirous thoughts, the Buddha said, is just to forget about it. And Ajahn Sona, he says, the example he gives for this is go and clean out a drawer or closet. So it's basically putting your mind somewhere else. So I'm not too sure exactly how that is different from number one. But anyway, that's the example I've been given by teachers, is to go distract yourself, go do something that's distracting. Then the fourth method is a stepping down method. And the analogy the Buddha gives is like, if you're running, why not walk? If you're walking, why not stand still? If you're standing still, why not sit down? If you're sitting down, why not lie down? So just an example I could think about this is if, you've got a whole bag of cookies you want to eat, maybe you could step it down and say, I will have just 3. Or instead of having several pieces of cake, I'll have one small piece of cake. or for me, I have this situation now where I'm not excreting potassium, and there's so many delicious foods full of potassium, and it's cherry season, and I love cherries. So instead of making myself sick by eating a bowl full of cherries, I'll say, okay, I can have 3 cherries. So this is stepping it down. Then the final one is one that we hopefully can avoid doing because it's not sort of a healthy thing to do, but it's sort of like an emergency situation. And that's the Buddha said, clenching your teeth, pushing your lips together, pushing your tongue on the top of your mouth. Um, so for me, this seems to be most relevant. Like if you had the desire to really like start yelling or saying nasty things to somebody, where it might cost you a relationship or it might cost you your job if you're doing this to your boss or something. So that seems like the most logical reason to me to do this, to be clenching down so nothing can come out of your mouth. But I mean, that's a really tight, stressful thing. So it's just hopefully can be a rare emergency move. Um, Then there's another sutta that the Buddha has, and this one has to do with sense restraint, and that's found in Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 5, number 200. So sense restraint is like, say you're walking through a shopping mall. Sense restraint is just like just seeing, just colors and shapes, but not going for the detail. It's not like looking in the store and going, look at that lovely, piece of clothing, or look at that lovely adult toy or whatever. But it's just, you're just walking through and it's just sort of like bare sight or bare hearing or whatever, and not going into the details and grabbing onto the details. The Buddha calls this grasping the sign. The sign is sort of like the details of objects that could pull your attention. Okay, so those are the ones where I had sutta references, and then I just have a few miscellaneous ones here. One of the issues with desire is that it's insatiable. Like you have a desire, you get your desired situation or object, and so you feel good for a certain period of time, and then up comes another desire. So it's not long lasting. A beautiful way to counter desire is with contentment. If you can just really feel content with how you are right now or what the situation is right now, yeah, then desire doesn't need to arise. If you're dealing with, a difficult situation or difficult emotions arising, if you use that holding technique to allow that to settle down, that would be an alternative to, feeling difficult emotion and running to the refrigerator to eat something, or, going on the computer and doing some kind of a video game or something like that. So yeah, just like holding, giving some attention, holding that emotion and letting it settle rather than running for some distracting desire like food, a common one. Um, Another beautiful way to deal with desire is to hang around your Kalyanamitas, your spiritual friends, and hopefully maybe a spiritual friend who's a little bit more advanced than you and has learned how to deal with desires. And then they're a beautiful role model for you. And then the final thing that I have is generosity. Instead of thinking about what can I get, it's then focusing on, giving. Okay, just give me a second here.